In 2016, I reviewed over 100 games and played closer to 200. And there was a lot of ones that were great, some in between, and pretty bad ones as well. And it may not be as memorable of a year for gaming as some years in the past, but there were still some fun experiences. So today, we're going to be counting down the top 20 games of 2016. This is, of course, my opinion, and it has to be a game I played, so there may be a few things here and there that were great that I just didn't get a chance to experience. But without further ado, here are the top 20 games of 2016. When I first saw the trailer for Unravel, I knew it was going to be something special, playing as a yarn doll platforming and solving puzzles through sunny meadows, desolate swamps, industrial areas filled with toxic goo that will instantly melt your character. There was a lot here to enjoy about it, along with a nice soundtrack that accompanied everything and a story that was told in an interesting way. Overall, Unravel may not have been a perfect platformer, but its uniqueness made it stand out and why it makes this list. There are a lot of clicker style of games, you know, those ones where you just keep clicking on things in order to profit. Well, Honeycam Studio is a lot like that, but with a little bit of management simulation thrown into the mix. Yeah, it's a bit perverted, but that's exactly what the charm of Honeycam Studio is, and I'm actually surprised after all these months that it ended up making my top 20 games of the year list, but I spent a lot of hours trying to get the Platinum trophy. I'm not going to say what kind of trophy it was for completing the game the best way, but Honeycam Studio got very addictive, and I enjoyed the personality that it did present, and it made me laugh plenty of times, and why Honeycam Studio is one of my favorite games of 2016. I love animation and cartoons, and the Little Acre is a full-blown living cartoon. Some of the best animation I have seen all year, and for a long time. It's a very simplistic adventure game, and at some points pretty easy, with a couple of distinct art styles to it. A more chibi version of the characters in one area, and a more fleshed out version in kind of the real world. It also tells a charming story with a great Celtic soundtrack behind it. The only issues it has, really, is that it can be a bit easy, and it is really short. But the journey through Little Acre is well worth taking. A platformer that I didn't expect much from, but immediately fell in love with, was Klaus. It's a weird game where you play as like a factory business worker, and you start off in the basement of this place, and slowly as you're making it through the levels, you have to solve more complex platforming puzzles, have a big giant version of yourself that joins you along for the adventure that allows you to solve even more types of puzzles, and an interesting story that's told throughout the course of the game. It had some really stellar, solid platforming that made it a lot of fun, especially when it came to the time trials that the game presented. Throw in some really crazy kind of physics-based stuff at the end of the game, and overall Klaus is one of my favorite platformers of the last few years. Ubisoft likes to milk its franchises, so there was no surprise there was another Far Cry game released this year, but I actually thought it was a cool experience getting to play as the primitive caveman-like character, using tools of the era and using a bow and arrow to shoot and take down enemies stealthily. It still had all the open-world antics that the other Far Cry games of the modern era had, and it may not have been that big of an evolution, but to me, Far Cry Primal was still a very fun experience in 2016. After playing Watch Dogs 1, I couldn't help but be disappointed by the experience, but I feel like Watch Dogs 2, while it's not perfect, was a big step up. The whole world was much brighter, the main character and other characters were so much more fleshed out and enjoyable to see the antics, cutscenes, and dialogue between them. It still had some great hacking action gameplay, and while the gunplay may not be amazing, and it definitely needs improvement as far as cover system is concerned, there was still enough within the world of Watch Dogs 2 to really make it stand out and be one of the funnest open world experiences in 2016. I consider myself a casual fan when it comes to fighting games and was disappointed by Street Fighter V, but King of Fighters 14 I think got a lot more of what I like in a fighting game included. There was a story mode. Yes, it may not be as fleshed out as some people would like it to be, but at least it was there on launch. There was also a bigger roster than I was necessarily expecting, though there were some characters that were missing that I wish had been making it in. But the core gameplay and fighting engine was just so much fun, especially against my friends and even going online with it, that King of Fighters 14 is one of my favorite fighting games of the last few years. While we may never get a true sequel to Super Mario RPG or a follow-up to Thousand Year Door from Paper Mario, at least we have the Mario and Luigi games, and while I didn't really like the fourth one all that much, I think they definitely bounced back with Mario and Luigi Paper Jam. Throwing in Paper Mario as a playable character and his whole world brought even more fun to the overall RPG battle system that was included. It has all the charm of the previous games, and I think is a huge step up from the fourth one, and is still one of the best games of 2016. I enjoy Metroidvania games and I love underwater settings, so Song of the Deep was perfect for me. You get to play as a young girl in her submarine and get to travel through the depths of the ocean, and it's very much like a traditional Metroidvania game where you have to go through areas and find new power-ups and upgrades and then go back to previous areas and explore in order to take on puzzles and other enemies that are trying to get to you. You can even jump out of the submarine. It reminded me a lot of traditional Blaster Master-like gameplay. Overall, Song of the Deep was one of my favorite surprises of the year, as I didn't even know what exactly it was when I played it, but I fell in love with it. While I didn't give it the shiniest of reviews, Am Setsuna is still one of the best JRPGs of the last 5 or 10 years. The whole throwback battle system to Chrono Trigger, a cool kind of system when it came to the items and magic system in the game, and an overall story, while it was very similar to past JRPGs, I still think was well told with some great characters along the course of the game. It may have had a hit or miss soundtrack for me that I've enjoyed more listening to it outside of the game than during gameplay, and the first 8 hours may be a bit easy for JRPG experts, but still, if you're a fan of that genre, you need to check out Am Setsuna. We're in the era of remakes, reboots, and remasters, and we saw the release of the Ratchet Clank movie, which was a retelling of the first game. We ended up getting a game based on the movie, and it did a good job of following the movie, though I think it's so much superior in a lot of ways than actually watching the film, and it still had a lot of the same fun gameplay and action from the previous Ratchet Clank games, and was a good retelling of that original Ratchet Clank game. While it may not be perfect, and some classic Ratchet Clank fans may see it as kind of a slap in the face to the series, I think overall Ratchet & Clank is still one of the funnest games in 2016. It's well known I'm not a big fan of the whole mining and crafting style of game, but Dragon Quest Builders won me over. It may have been the whole Dragon Quest aesthetic set in that world with multiple different areas of the world you get to explore, mine, and build, and with a whole crafting system that was pretty easy to learn without being overbearing or boring for the most part. I liked building up my town, building the defenses, and taking on the enemy forces as they were coming my way, as well as exploring the world and fighting so many of the DQ monsters. Overall, one of the biggest surprises for me in 2016 was actually loving Dragon Quest Builders. One of my favorite series of all time is the Shin Megami series, and when I saw there was a sequel to Shin Megami Tensei 4, I was excited, though I wasn't sure how they were going to pull it off, and they pulled it off great with Shin Megami Tensei 4 Apocalypse. This was an extension and a continuation of the world that was set in Shin Megami Tensei 4, presenting the same gameplay with a few tweaks here and there to make that fun JRPG action even better than it had been in the previous title. Factoring all the great things with the monsters and creative locations and of course the music to go along with everything, Shin Megami Tensei 4 was one of my favorite RPG experiences of the year. I used to love the classic Harvest Moon games, and the indie title Stardew Valley came along and brought all that charm of those old games and brought it to a new generation, and did so quite well. The whole farming aspect was there, along with other stuff like going through a mine, battling creatures, and of course the whole element of building up relationship with the townspeople, potentially even marrying and having kids with them. Multiple different seasons, birthdays, and holidays, and tons of other stuff to dive into. Overall, Stardew Valley is one of those games you could sink hundreds of hours into and still not see everything, but feel like you haven't spent much time with the game at all. Easily one of the best indie games of the last few years. There was no doubt in my mind that WayForward was going to deliver another great Shantae experience with HalfGenie Hero, but I was actually surprised at just how much I had fun playing through the newest game in the franchise. It has some of the most gorgeous looking animations and artwork of any platformer I have ever played. It's still relatively short and is kind of a Metroidvania light, but everything that was great about the previous Shantae games is included here, with awesome animal transformations, puzzle solving, and great characters along the way to make Shantae HalfGenie Hero one of my favorite games of the year. After really enjoying the recent Wolfenstein games, I was excited to get my hands on the new Doom, and it was just what I was hoping for. It had tons of action, tons of gore, and even though the instant kill moves could wear on you a little bit, they never slowed down the gameplay enough to really get on my nerves. It had some awesome environments, especially when you got to travel to hell and battle demons head on. While the bosses I felt left a little bit to be desired, overall Doom was one of the most action-packed and great experiences I had all year. I had no expectations when I booted up Valley for the first time, but I very quickly fell in love with it. You have the whole aesthetic of having these mechanical legs that you attach near the beginning. The whole setting is kind of in an alt history that involves World War II. And soon, when you get control of the legs, you're able to run down mountainsides, jump over giant gaps, swing across from hooks, and even get on rails to go really fast through extreme tunnels. Overall, Valley presents itself with a very interesting world, some great music to accompany the action, and some of the funnest action first-person platforming I've ever had the privilege of experiencing. I may cheat a little bit with this one, but the Witcher 3 Blood and Wine expansion was one of the best gaming experiences I had all year. It built upon what was already there with Witcher 3, very much true, but it had so much gameplay added to it with a very cool and different looking world than the one we got to experience already with Witcher 3. Had a great storyline for its main quest and tons of side content for you to jump into. In fact, I think I spent more hours with Witcher 3 Blood and Wine than I spent with a lot of the other games on this list or that I played all year. Overall, one of the best expansions ever, and one of my favorite games of 2016. Naughty Dog is one of the best game developers of all time, and for good reason when they present games like Uncharted 4 that had some of the best storytelling, cinematics, and cutscenes that I have seen in a very long time. With so many ups and downs and twists and turns throughout the main plot, I couldn't wait to see the next plot point, getting to that next big spot in the story to see what was going to happen between the main characters. Then you factor in the awesome gunplay and action, plenty of treasure hunting, and even platforming, climbing up mountains. Uncharted 4 is a lengthy experience, but easily one of the best of the last 10 or so years. A bit of a controversial one though, but my number one game of the year is Final Fantasy 15. Don't get me wrong, it's not a perfect Final Fantasy game, and there's going to be a lot of Final Fantasy fans that don't like it. Truly, I understand that. But the open world action RPG elements is what made me fall in love with this game. I really like the characters and the development between them. I love the whole journey of just this small group going from area to area, pulling into just the various rest stops and towns, meeting with people, and a lot of the side questing was a ton of fun to me, even with a little bit of it being a bit repetitive. Had some great hunts, some awesome monsters, and plenty of little nooks and crannies for you to jump into and be able to explore. Throwing little like Easter eggs of stuff like being able to get all the soundtracks to previous Final Fantasy games and listen to them in the car, just overall brought me into this world that FF15 created and made me love it. Now, I do think there is some issues when it comes to the game's plot, especially at the very end when things kind of just steamroll into one another as the game gets to its concluding point, but I was overall satisfied with the final ending, at least, to the game. It's not perfect, but Final Fantasy XV gave me more hours and more enjoyment than any other game in 2016. So there you have it, my top 20 games of 2016. What was your favorite game of 2016? And even if it was one that I hated, or was on my at least disappointing list, that's awesome that you found a game that you really ended up enjoying and having a lot of fun with. We're all gamers and we all have different opinions, that is for sure. Plenty of people out there are going to have FF15 on their worst or most disappointing list, and some of the games that people love, like Last Guardian, I just ended up having too much frustration with to really end up overall enjoying. 2016 was kind of a middle-of-the-road kind of year for me, but at least it wasn't so overhyped like previous years that I ended up feeling let down by the overall games released. It may not stand the test of time as one of the best gaming years ever, but I still really had a lot of fun with 2016. But anyway guys, that's going to wrap up the top 20 games of 2016 list. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course I hope you enjoyed.